All right, we're going to try this again. So we're going to do another sort of informative video about a topic that has been, how would I put it, hotly debated for years and years now, probably at least 20 years. Pete Fisk recently put up a archive blog about this. It just so happened to coincide with my plan on doing this particular video. But the topic is, for the most part, it'll be about grading, meaning what we do to grade figures, vehicles, all this other loose figures, all this other stuff. But of course, the way that I'm going to talk about it is not just grading, but just sort of what, how do we preserve items? What is grading? What does it really mean? I'm not here to discuss who's better, what's better, or anything like that, just to kind of talk about the basics of all that's involved. Grading has a very storied history. Grading's been around for forever, and it all started with, of course, the classic things that people cared about: conditions, and that was either something like stamps, coins, and then it started to get into trading cards, especially sports cards, and then finally got into other vintage items, toys and such. I don't think I've ever seen grading of antique furniture or lamps or anything like that, but you can take those things to appraisers, and of course they'll kind of give you a rundown on what they think the value is based on certain properties of it. And that's essentially what the grading companies are supposed to do. But there's really, several aspects that they're trying to do. I mean, an evaluation. So what is grading? Grading is, it's an evaluation. And I think more importantly, especially in a lot of the Star Wars stuff, is authentication, because we want to know that the things that we have are authentic, especially nowadays when there are countless ways of, producing lookalikes. And so authentication is actually a very important thing if that's your thing. Now some people don't really care about that, and they just want to display an item because it looks, similar to something. So anyways, so there's that. And so, one of the things that authentication does is it gives you, like, basically alluded to, is confidence in the items that you have, that they are true, tried and true. And then, of course, it's a way of displaying things. So we're going to go over all that. And so, there's only a handful of companies out there now. Back in the day when, more online businesses started to come about, the sales of vintage toys started to increase, so there was this, need for, again, sort of authentication, preservation of items. And so several companies started to come about. Now, for comics, I think everybody knows, what is it, CGC, Certified Guarantee Company or something like that. AFA, believe it or not, or CGA, I should say, started around the same time that they did. It was early, 2000. And basically wanted to, there was a guy in Michigan, a collector, that saw a need in a company that would authenticate and grade and preserve items. And so that's where it all kind of came from. And then in 2008, in the UK, that's when the UKG started, the UK graders. And the reason why mainly is because probably shipping cost, because constantly people were having to send things over to the States to get graded. And then, of course, you have to ship it back. And that's, shipping costs are a lot. And especially if you have a value attached to that shipment, then, of course, the import costs are even greater. So UKG was started. And then, of course, over the last couple of years, there's been another new company, CAS, Collector Archive Services, that we all know. And then there's, some smaller companies that are around. APG is one that's around right now. But believe it or not, there have been many, many companies that have been around, but most don't last greater than about 3 years. Okay. So anyways, So what does it mean to have something graded? Now you can get so many different things graded. Loose figures. This one is just an olive green chest Boba Fett, and again, part of the purpose of this video is also to show some things in my collection, but it's more to go over sort of what's involved. And so this is a loose figure. It's a olive green chested Fett, thought to be sort of one of the first paint variants of Fett. And so this is one thing you can do. Now, a lot of us like bagged figures, and so this is a UKG one. You can see it there. This label used to be blue, now it's white. There's the hologram stamp. Anyways, this is one way of displaying a bag figure that UKG does. And then you can even have the shorter version. This is an ESB B baggie, and this is a true Star Wars or SWB baggie. But anyways, these are ways of displaying figures or bagged figures. This is just another example. This is a brown-haired Luke Bespin ESBA. This is probably the most common Luke Bespin that there is. If you have a blonde ESBA Luke Bespin, let me know. No, I'm kidding. Luckily, I've already have one in a case. But anyway, so this is a way of displaying bag figures. Now, of course, a lot of us, always talk about MOCs, and people have kind of a beef with grading, because a lot of times people think grading is very inconsistent. One of the things that you'll maybe want to know is that, believe it or not, these pieces pass between many hands. It's not as if you get one hungover grader that whose eyes may be glazed over, and that's the grade that you get from that particular person. No, this usually goes to at least a couple of people, and so everyone agrees on that grade. But there's a lot of discrepancies in the grading of a piece that people often argue about, and there's been many debates. I have kind of a my 21 back Fetts are a great example of the differences in grading. Because one of the things you have to always remember is, one of the important things about grading is the date. So of course the longer the date is, the more likely that the grade will go down over time, because these things degrade. The color changes. There might be some wrinkling of the bubble or lifting or anything like that. So, but this is just an example. So this is my 21A. See it there. And then this grade, this is a straight 85 21A. And when you really look at this, actually I'm lying. It's not straight 85s. The card itself got an 80. Okay. And so you look at this and you think, well, why is this card an 80? And the reason why, I'm guessing, is because there's actually a little bit of a warp to the card that you can see right there. But the rest, the figure is a spanking 85, as well as the bubble is a spanking 85. So the 85 is sort of the overall feel of the figure. The subgrades, are meant to give you a flavor of those particular topics. Now, for MOCs, you have the card, you have the bubble, and then you have the figure. Now, with each of those three things, there are a million different attributes of those things that go into the grading. And the final grade is not an average of those grades, or at least not with AFA, but it's sort of the overall feel of it. So you can actually have, for example, this has 285 subs and an 80 sub, but yet it's an 85, and that's just because of the overall feel of the grade is more of an 85. Now, to counter that, I have a 21B that is an 80, okay? Now, the subgrades on this one, the card itself got an 85. You can see that it's punched, though. And so the punch, that's one thing that people always talk about. The punch doesn't always matter unless, let's say that there was a tear or vein around the punch or something like that. Then it favors, or at least it comes into play in terms of the overall grade. But if it's just simply a simple punch, it doesn't play much of a role in the grade itself. But anyways, the subgrades, like I said, a card was 85. The bubble is an 80. Okay, and the reason why is the bubble an 80 is because there's a little bit of a dent in the stem here. I'm sure that doesn't show up too well, but that's probably where the 80 came in. And of course, the figure, it's another spanking 85. Now, one thing you'll notice is both on the 21A and the 21B that I have is that the weapons are still taped to the bubble. Now, that usually, if the gun is not, or the accessory is not taped to the bubble, that usually will drop the sub to an 80. Okay, but if you have just a spanking example and the tape is still there, but the weapon is off, you can still sometimes get an 85 sub on the figure itself, on the figure part. Okay. So anyway, so this got an 80 overall, despite having two sub 85s and an 80. Okay, so almost the same, but the difference here is that it was the bubble that got the lower grade and probably has an overall aesthetic feel to the figure, hence why it got an 80. Now, of course, there's the designation. There's a plus sometimes, and usually the plus is there to kind of take away if there's a disagreement, oh, this is an 80, oh, this is an 85, what do we do? Then usually it comes down to, well, we can make this easy, we'll just make an 80 plus. So that's usually why that's at. And then finally, the 21C here. Now, if you look at the 21C, you'll notice that this one has a bubble protector, and that's because there's a pretty big dent in the side of the bubble. In fact, the bubble here got a 75, and that really sort of brought down the overall aesthetic of the piece itself, despite having an 85 figure. Again, the gun is still attached, and the card here is an 80 because it's got a slight wave to it. But this got an overall of a 75 plus, okay? And the main reason is just because the aesthetic of the bubble. The reason it got a plus is probably because the other parts were so good, there was a discrepancy between should this be a 75 or an 80, and they say, oh, okay, this is just going to be a 75 plus. And so it's not pure math here. A lot of it is subjective, but you have supposedly at least a couple of people that are looking at it and kind of giving you a final sort of grade on it. Now, one thing I wanted to do is just sort of go through one. So this figure right here, obviously it's not graded. This is a white-footed Leia. The nice thing, or the reason why I like this one, a lot, is because this has a price sticker on it. As I talked about before, the white footers typically don't have price stickers, so this one clearly made it into circulation somehow. This thing is also missing the proof of purchase. Now there's a couple of flaws that are on. There's veins near the punch here. There's a little litho tear in the car here. The bubble itself is actually almost a perfect bubble. There's a little lifting down where the pop was removed. And so when you look at this, if you just look at it just from afar, it actually has a great presentation. But because of all these little problems with it, probably would get a 70, overall, just because of the way it looks. But the fact that it's missing the pop will drop that quite a bit, especially for the card. But at least it's on the back. It's not the presentation of the front. So anyway, so this would probably get lower than that overall. So I misspoke when I said the 70. But anyways, that's just kind of, so these are some things to look at. Now, people say that that the numbers change, or the numbers can change the value. Obviously, the value of a 75 versus an 85 can be significant. But, that's for the people that care about those kinds of things. I mean, for me personally, I'm not a grade chaser, but it is interesting to know kind of what goes into grading. The other thing that people talk about or often wonder about is the price stickers. Usually as long as the price sticker is not placed in a very important part in the card, not in the middle of the art, not torn, not with any handwriting on it or anything like that, it usually doesn't affect the grade too much. As I said before, the fact that if it's punched or unpunched usually doesn't change much unless there's some changes in the card around the punch, or even, when you have ink, that that kills it, meaning it won't even be graded for that. We talked about the weapon a little bit. The weapon, as long as the tape's attached, the weapon doesn't change it too much, but usually that drops it down to an automatic 80 for that subgrade. But anyways, so we've got an example here. So this is a MOC. This is a skew Luke. I don't know if you can see the glare, the skew numbers on the footer, but this is in fact a straight 85 skew Luke, and this has a price sticker. It is punched, and so just from that you can still get a pretty high grade from a grading company, despite having those issues. Meaning it doesn't necessarily have to be a clean card, meaning unpunched, no price sticker, so on and so forth. But this is a great example of that. This is a very clean example, and it's reflected by the grade finally. Now, beyond the sort of, value that grades sometimes can put on pieces, I think personally what's most important about the companies that grade is that they have the ability to preserve, authenticate, and even create some custom displays, okay? Because really, in the end, these are our collections, and unless you're a flipper or reseller or something like that, then you can sometimes have a little fun with casing up your items to make them what you want to be. One of my favorite customs is, of course, this one that I've shown before, where it's the 5 series of Star Wars trading cards together in one acrylic package. This was a spanking job that was done by Cass. They have a lot of, in fact, that's probably what they're best known for right now, is probably their customization of whatever you want. Whether you want to take a vehicle out of the package and display it with the paperwork, whatever you can come up with, they'll do. And it's fantastic. So this is one way of customizing. Another way is something like this. This is a piece I picked up not too long ago, but it has the prototype FET Starburst offer. There's a bag FET that was put in here, the apology note, a catalog, and then the actual catalog where the FET first appeared in terms of the offer. So this is a great custom piece. I mean, these make, awesome additions to your shelf. This is an unconventional way of displaying stuff. So that is something that the grading companies can do for you that make your collection a little bit more lively. This is another piece that I love. This is part of the collection of figures from the Plastic Galaxy movie that I got. This is just a signed card by Stillman, and then of course the figure that was used in the movie. This is just another way of what they can do with their displays. This is another cast product. This is an awesome looking piece. I had many more of these that I sold off, but this is just another thing that's very, just again a unique setup that you can do. This is that same catalog before that I just had cased up alone, just to highlight the FET. I have a display that's going to be put together in the next probably couple of years that has all the FET offer stuff. This was just one of the pieces that will go into it, but this makes a great display of that catalog, open to the page that I wanted for it. Again, this is another cast creation that's awesome. Going to damage everything around here. Anyways, of course you can do vehicles. Now AFA has what's called a Q grade. Now Q grade is great. It's a qualified grade, and it's usually for boxes that have been opened but all the contents are still there. So not a sealed box, but they can verify that all the contents of the box are original and complete. This is one of those. This is just a qualified grade, but I just love, this is the the first edition of the X-Wing with the LP logo. I think this thing displays very well in a case. I don't have to worry about the warped cardboard to stand up on its own. Another thing is that So some of the display bells, when they were shipped, they have this display questionnaire that was in there. This was just one of the ways that you could, put this in acrylic and display it. Now, one of the other issues is, like I said, authentication. Sometimes you'll get something authenticated and you'll get some paperwork. CIB does a great job at that, and they often send us, a certified letter essentially that's signed, usually by Derby, that authenticates an item. And some people choose to display that letter in the display itself alongside the piece. And so one of those pieces that I have is a sealed FET mailer, and then of course we have the CIB letter next to it. So this is another way of sort of a unique display of an item that comes with its own authentication letter. Or you can do something very much more simple, like just case up the sealed box in something like this. So anyways, so the idea of all this, now here's the other thing, is that there are also companies that sell the acrylic cases for a lot of these items without the need for grading them, meaning that you can have access to those items, and a lot of people prefer that if they don't want to go through the grading time and cost that it takes. GW Acrylic Cases is a great company that has a wide variety of cases that you can buy, and they have slip bottoms that you can put all your, whatever it was destined for, whether it was an MOC or a mailer or whatever it is. Go to their website and check it out. But anyways, also CGA sells cases that you can buy that have slip bottoms that you can display your items in. And so just because, even if you don't like grading, it's a way of displaying your items that are easily, you can stand them up on the shelf. You can get these book displays and lean them back, whatever you want to do. But it allows you a lot of options for display, because a lot of these things don't stand up on their own. Like I said, sometimes the cardboard's a little bent and it doesn't, the boxes don't sit up as much as you would like. So it's a great way of displaying things. I think that's probably about all I'll talk about. One of the other things that I think people have to also remember is that just because something is mint on card doesn't mean that it's mint. The figures that are were often put on the cards before the bubbles were put in them. I mean, these figures are often in a bin, they roll around, they get paint chips, they get all kinds of things. And so one of the practices that was abandoned recently was, of course, U-grading. U-grading being that you would open a sealed item, especially a figure on card, and then have the figure graded. That was recently abandoned just because it was blasphemy to open up a sealed card. CAS has a preserve grade, a P grade, which is great for stuff like that. So you can have these cut bubbles, or let's just say a completely trashed MOC, but still sealed with the bubble. So you can preserve that just with a P grade, which I think is great. That was a great idea and really offers, another way of preserving, items that might be near and dear to you for some reason. Anyways, so that's sort of a rundown on grading, displaying, authentication, all that. If you have any questions, you can always ask. Hope you guys are staying safe. We'll do another one in the near future. Who knows what that's going to be at this point in time. All right, talk to you then.